Welcome to the HR Chat Show, one of the world's most downloaded and shared podcasts designed for HR pros, talent execs, tech enthusiasts, and business leaders. For hundreds more episodes and what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit hrgazette.com.
Welcome to another episode of the HR Chat Show. I'm your host today, Bill Banham, and joining me on this episode is the fabulous, wonderful, fantastic Nellie Wartoft, CEO and founder over at Tigerhall. Nellie is a Swedish entrepreneur who launched social learning platform Tigerhall back in 2019 to disrupt how professionals learn from one another in the real world. Under Nellie's leadership, Tigerhall has quickly gained traction with users across 32 countries and employees in 12 markets. Big names who are using Tigerhall include AWS, Bloomberg, KPMG, Singlife, EY, and a whole bunch more. Nellie, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you, Bill. I'm so happy to be here.
So beyond my reintroduction there, Nellie, why don't you start by taking a couple of minutes and introducing yourself? And as part of your answer, please share how your career and personal experiences led you to start Tigerhall.
Absolutely. I think as many entrepreneurs, what led me to start Tigerhall was a whole load of frustrations. And that's where many start, like just being so frustrated with something. And in my case, I was frustrated 3 times in my life, or 3 large periods of my life. The first time was in high school, and I grew up in Sweden. I'm from a small village in southern Sweden with more cows than people, and went to school there, and then later moved to Singapore when I was 18. And when I was in high school, I was very frustrated by the curriculum. So I was one of those tricky students that was questioning everything that we learned. And why are we learning things that we don't need in real life? Why are we spending so much time on the Pythagoras theorem, on memorizing the periodical table? Like, these are not things that I'm going to need to know when I'm an adult. Then I need to know, how does a credit card work? What's compound interest? How do I lead a team? So I was very frustrated in high school. And then that carried over to my university experiences, which was in Singapore. So I did a bachelor's of business management and law in Singapore, and I was very frustrated by the time that I got out and felt like I was not at all prepared for what was going to come and what I wanted to work with in the corporate world. So I felt like I came out very unprepared. And this is after having spent 7+ years working at McDonald's, selling suits, hustling to get the tuition fee for this university education. And I felt that was money going down the drain. So that was the second time I was very frustrated with the education system. And the third time was after university, when I got out and started to work. I started in recruitment and was with a large global corporation. And then I was a very frustrated employee. I was a top performer. I brought in some of the biggest revenue numbers in the business. I had a very high performing team, and I absolutely hated our corporate learning. I was like, why is the L&D team taking time that I don't have? I want to spend my time on bringing in the numbers, generating revenue for the company. And why are they wasting my time on all of these useless workshops that are done by usually old white men that have never done what they're talking about, and all of these very long videos with someone putting their hand together in a very unnatural way, having a plant in the background, and just like going, "Hi, welcome to my course." I was like, why would I be watching this? So I was very frustrated with corporate learning and what we were getting. And when I was working with my candidates, I saw the same frustration in them. They wanted to get ahead. They wanted to get their next role. They wanted to grow in their careers, and they were not given those opportunities by their employer. So that's when I started thinking, how can we completely reshape corporate learning and change the way it's done? And that's what led me to start Tigerhall 5 years ago.
Thanks for tuning in to the HR Chat podcast. If you're enjoying this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. And now, back to the conversation.
Okay, so I liked you before we hit record. I thought you were pretty cool. And then hearing hearing what you just said there, I like you even more. The fact that you worked hard and you were having jobs at places like McDonald's to pay for your tuition fees. I have a lot of respect for you, and I think that's very admirable. And look where you are now. You're in your early 30s and you're running an awesome company that's making a genuine difference to the world of work. But this is not an interview with me, so I'll shut up about my opinions and get back to asking you the questions. You are a big advocate, Nellie, of social mobility across the world. This belief is rooted in the fact that everyone should have the opportunity to reach their life goals and become successful at what they do, regardless of their background or their circumstances. And again, going back to your previous answer, you worked hard to get to where you are today. Tell us more about why you are such an advocate of social mobility.
I think that's the most important thing in the world. And what you just said there, having everyone being able to reach their life goals, become successful at what they do, regardless of their background or circumstances, that is the very mission of Tigerhall. And that's what we are trying to build. And the reason for that is that I think without social mobility, the world dies. If people don't believe that they have the chance to be better off than their parents, then the world just entirely loses hope. And if I tell you that, Bill, you can't be better than your parents, you can't create a better future for yourself, you can't do what you want to do in life, then why would you work? Like, why would you put in an effort? Why would you try to make the world a better place? Why would you contribute? What would those efforts count for? So I think social mobility is such a primary driver and motivator in people's lives. And that is what is getting the world ahead. That's what leads to job creation, to innovation, to problem solving. All of that starts with social mobility at the core. And people are starting to doubt it. People are losing faith in social mobility, and they think that the system is entirely rigged. And most of the time, it actually is very rigged, and not least in our educational system. There was actually a New York Times piece that was coming out just yesterday that said that if your parents are in the top 1% of income earners in the United States, you are 30 times more likely to get into an Ivy League school than if your parents are in the bottom 10%. And this is ceteris paribus. So this is not accounting for SAT scores or like any other differences. These are children with the same SAT scores, the same academic performance, the same extracurriculars, everything being equal. You have a 30 times higher chance to get into Ivy League if your parents are in the top 1% of income earners. And that's f***ed up, frankly. That's entirely f***ed up. And the role that education plays in social mobility is huge. Is usually a ticket out for people. It's a ticket to a better life. And if that education world is not working, then social mobility is not working. And that's why I want to change the entire education system as we know it, because the Ivy Leagues are not going to change. They haven't changed for the past 200 years. So we can't rely on the existing players to improve or to change things. We need to provide alternatives. And after spending over 10 years on this issue, I think that social learning is that alternative.
Yeah, right on. I can get behind that. There's so many young folks today who feel like upward social mobility is more of a pipe dream than a reality for many of them. The cost of living continues to go up. Getting on the property ladder seems to be near impossible for younger people, certainly these days. And it's important when folks like yourself get out there and spread that message that anybody can do it if you work hard and you are given. If you're given the opportunities, you can make it happen.
Once in a while, an event series is born that shakes things up, it makes you think differently, and it leaves you inspired. That event is Disrupt HR. The format is 14 speakers, 5 minutes each, and slides rotate every 15 seconds. If you're an HR professional, a CEO, a technologist, or a community leader and you've got something to say about talent, culture, or technology, Disrupt is the place. It's coming soon to a city near you. Learn more at disrupthr.co.
Nellie, please share what you mean by social learning. And as part of your answer, can you reference the framework of the 5 pillars of a social learning approach you discussed in an article on medium.com called How to Start Implementing Social Learning at Your Organization.
Absolutely. So social learning is a different way of doing corporate learning and doing education and talent development. And the 5 elements that goes into it, and the 5 elements that you also can start applying to different extents, depending on where you're at in your journey, is number 1, having an engaging user experience. So the UI and UX is very, very core of it. And it's core because if you don't have an engaging user experience, then nothing else matters. Because regardless of how engaging and authentic your content is, if it's hidden behind those 17 clicks behind the intranet, or requires the user to log in every time they want to use it, then no one will make the effort to access it in the first place. So having that easy to use, accessible, one-click medium is a must for social learning to work effectively, because otherwise no one is going to adopt it or use it at all. And once you have that UI, UX, and you get them into the platform in one click, and it's easy to access, then what? Then you need engaging content. So number 2 is the content. And I think engaging content is one of the most underrated areas in corporate learning. And people tend to be so feature focused that they forget that the importance of engaging content is very, very high. And just think about, people don't spend hours on Netflix or TikTok because of the amazing UI UX alone. The UI UX is still just a hygiene factor and the bare minimum to even have a chance of engaging people in 2023. So once you've gotten them into the platform in one click, then you need to have engaging content in there. And I think that's one of the most underrated aspects of corporate learning, because if people are in there, they're not going to just hang around and watch the content because your features are great. And when people hang around on Netflix or TikTok, they go there for the content that they've been addicted to. So whether it's the latest K-drama series or 78 variations of a smoothie recipe, they go there for the content. So the user experience is that key factor in getting them there in the first place. And then the content is what makes them stay. So regardless of the features you might have in a learning platform, the content is so key. So engaging content is the second. Third is authenticity. So you need to have authentic leaders and not these stiff instructors that are all suited up, looking down the camera lens with a carefully placed plant in the background and saying, "Welcome to this course." That's not going to engage anyone. So having authentic leaders involved, having authentic content that is based on the real world and real world examples, avoiding things like unnecessary business jargon or sharing like old case studies. It needs to be authentic to the listener and the learner. And the fourth is real time. So I call this the happening capture deliver ratio. And when you think of content production and learning, like what's your happening capture deliver ratio? What's the time it takes from a success to happen in your organization to the time it's been captured in a shareable format to the time it's delivered to the right people who can benefit from that learning? And that's what you should aim for, same day delivery. Because people are used to same-day delivery. They get it on Deliveroo and Amazon all the time. Why can't they get same-day delivery in the workplace too? So it needs to be real time. And many times I'm seeing organizations being stuck in content production processes that are more like vaccine testing and approval processes. It takes months and years, and there are too many people involved, too many vetting and approval processes, and too much fear of being imperfect. So by the time the learning content is ready and shared internally, it's already outdated and irrelevant. So that's why the speed is so crucial. And the fifth aspect of social learning is the social context, because no one operates in a vacuum. And the more you can bring your employees' social context into their learning experiences, the more relevant, engaging, and applicable it will be for them. So there are 3 parts to your social context, right? It's your internal social context. So that's within your company. How can you bring their leaders, their colleagues into that learning experience? And then you have the external social context, which is usually underestimated in my opinion. So that's thinking through how can you enable your employees to learn from your customers, from your vendors, from partners, from people who operate in your external ecosystem. Because every business operates within a wider ecosystem, and your employees' understanding of this wider ecosystem is very crucial to your business success too. So internal, external, and then third is how can you leverage that social context to amplify that application of learning once you have the internal social context and the external social context as part of learning as well. So those are the 5 elements to a social learning approach. It's the user experience, it's the engaging content, the authenticity, the real-time aspect of it, the speed, and the social context. So those are the 5 elements coming together that creates this high engagement, high adoption learning culture in large organizations.
Now then, you recently wrote a post called 5 Things Corporate Learning Can Learn from the Epic Success of Threads. I've got on Threads a couple of times. I'm still scratching my head a little bit with it. Can you share some of those learnings with us now? And as part of your answer, please include mention of why you think social media and consumer apps are so engaging, but everyone hates the LMS and corporate learning.
Yeah, everyone does hate their LMS. I think that shows in the adoption and the engagement rates of LMS platforms. And when it comes to Threads, I mean, it's just been a few weeks. So it's yet to say if Threads has been an epic success, and they still have a lot of data to show, user engagement to show for that, and so on. But what we can say is that the adoption of Threads, the launch adoption, has been an epic success. And I many times see learning leaders and HR leaders launch learning technologies to a complete missed audience. Like it just goes dead. And they launch something, but it's not well thought through. They don't have the communications plans, so they're not tapping into these areas that would make a successful launch. And if you don't have successful launch with great adoption, it will be very hard to drive engagement thereafter. So when I looked at Threads, and I downloaded probably the first or second day after they had launched, always interested in new technology. And looking at the weeks after that and how it played out, I think it was 5 things that they did right that I think you can learn from if you're a learning leader looking to launch a learning technology. And the first of those 5 is that real people matter. Like, we are social creatures, our connection with other humans matter, and we're kind of biologically hardwired to listen to people of influence, trust authority, and find out what's happening in the community around us. And that was very much what was driving people to join Threads, to see what's going on, what are other people saying, and looking at your LMS, like there is no such curiosity around those long-form videos from stuffy brands and academic institutions that are sitting in your LMS or learning initiatives. So how can you leverage real people? That is one. The second one is the back and forth interaction. Looking at most corporate learning initiatives, it tends to be very much, we feed you all the content. It's a one way, you have to consume it and complete it, and then you're done. And that's kind of the opposite of what actually drives people's engagement, their contribution and participation, because they want to feel included. They want to be included in the conversation. They want to feel heard and seen. And when they don't feel that, they're naturally going to just switch off, right? And right now in corporate learning, there is very little back and forth interaction. It's more like you consume all of this content, you mark it complete, and then I'm going to look great. And that's not how it works. So that's another learning. And then, of course, seeing how people are interacting. How do they want to consume content? How do they want to interact? It's all bite-sized, it's quick, it's mobile, and the ease of downloading and setting up a Threads account, it was like 3 clicks and you're in. And then you stay logged in. Whereas on an LMS, you many times have to click 17 times through to your intranet to reach something or do anything. And when we look at how we interact with our phones, we pick up our phones 144 times per day on average. So the way that we have people interacting with technology and having that bite-sized, quick, mobile, that's a clear evidence of what drives adoption too. And then I think what they did well is how they got the leaders involved. When I was on there in the first couple of weeks, the amount of times I saw Adam Mosseri or Mark Zuckerberg get involved in a random conversation with anyone and everyone in those first weeks was really off the charts. So, and it seemed to me when I was looking at my feed that they were actually replying to a large majority of all of those threads. And I think that goes to show again that there's nothing more effective than dog fooding, leaders leading by example, and having your leaders involved in learning initiatives as well. So getting them involved, getting them to lead from the front, I think is incredibly important for adoption and for a launch campaign. And then the last is how Threads were leveraging their Instagram user base. And now everyone's like, oh, you have a 2.3 billion people Instagram user base that you can just tap into for that quick social adoption. But the thing is, even in an enterprise, you have an existing employee base. And that employee base is connected to many of your existing enterprise systems, that being your HRIS, your Microsoft Graph, and all the systems that you have to communicate internally and to manage employees internally. So just like Threads created those pre-existing followers from their Instagram base, that means that you can also create the followers, the following, the social graph, learning cohorts, and so on. You can actually do that before a launch from that data available in your HRIS or Microsoft Graph. So I think that was another very interesting thing that they did that I think could be applicable in a corporate learning scenario too.
Okay, very comprehensive. Thank you very much. As I mentioned earlier on, we are living through crazy times at the moment. Cost of living is going through the roof in many places. Money is a priority for a lot of employees right now, but of course, their professional development is very important too. If they want to get on and grow in their careers, or indeed do something similar to what you did and start their own gig one day, perhaps. Why do you believe, therefore, that learning opportunities and talent development is a core differentiator in employer branding, in candidate attraction, and of course in retention of your best people? And perhaps as part of your answer, Nellie, you can tell us why, and I'm quoting you now, why great development opportunities draw and retain great talent.
Yeah, I think great people want to get better all the time, right? And that is what makes them great. And I think sometimes people fail to understand that when people talk about great talent and top talent, is that if you look at top talent, like, yes, they're smart and they work hard and all of that, but they're all also about continuous improvement. So that's how you get better all the time. That is what makes them great talent. And they're going to look for employers who can provide them with those opportunities. So take Google, for example. When Google started out 20 years ago, and they were looking for the best engineers, right? And it was tough competition, the best engineers out of Stanford, they wanted to recruit and so on. And what did those engineers want? A place where you can learn and where you can grow, where you can learn more, expand your skill set, expand your mindset. So that's what initially led Google to double down so much on learning and talent development, was to attract those engineers that they wanted to work at Google, and of course retain them thereafter. And when I was in recruitment, I spent 4 years in recruitment. The most common reason that for people's RFL, as we call it, which is reason for leaving, the number one RFL is a bad manager. That is by far the most common reason that people leave their jobs, is I hate my manager, or manager change, or like something around the manager. The second most common reason for leaving is I'm not given any learning opportunities. I'm not learning, I'm not growing, I don't have any opportunities to grow my mind and grow my skill set. So that's the second most common reason that people leave. And it's just natural that great people are motivated by learning. It's almost like that growth is the goal. And people are not interested in learning anything. They're naturally going to fall behind, and they won't be as successful as their peers who are interested in learning. And that's why the top talent in the world are very much natural learners. And that's why employers have to cater for that. So it's kind of like a natural selection that you have to cater to as an employer.
Okay, thank you. Now then, we've done pretty well so far in this interview because I've not yet asked a direct question about the impact of AI on employees. But here it comes, because it's the hottest topic in the world of work right now, I'd say. I also run a bunch of events, just side story, run a bunch of events, listeners, for HR pros and leaders and whatnot in the UK and Canada and elsewhere. And one of those event series is Disrupt HR. At a recent Disrupt HR London, we had 12 speakers. 5 of those had a topic which was all about AI and how it's augmenting and changing up the world of work. So here's my question for you. The focus on AI and data is increasing at pace, of course. Any tips to help leaders and HR pros upskill their employees in those areas, and perhaps that includes a much needed upgrade of tech skills and data literacy so that people can remain relevant.
So I think as with everything else in learning, it's bit by bit and it's starting somewhere, right? I mean, of course, you can learn about it on Tigerhall from people who are implementing and working with AI in different industries and companies. And there are trails around generative AI, applying AI for productivity and so on. But I think besides the learning piece of it, I think it's a lot about starting small. Like, for example, using GPT in different work processes. How can you be creative around your use of GPT? And a lot of it is around piquing curiosity and speaking about the why, because a natural tendency that people have when anything is new, especially new technology, is that people get very scared. And immediately they're going to think, or 80% of people are going to think, am I going to lose my job? What is this going to lead to? I can't keep up. It's too much, and so on. And something I always think about that I would recommend or can share is that I always think that change is nothing more than a big group of people changing how they do something a little bit. So it's always that big group of people driving it, doing it, and so on, which means that you might as well be part of that big group of people. And when things are happening like AI or GPT, like, people are very quick to wanting to be thought leaders on it and speak out about it and so on, which might lead people to think that, oh, there are so many people that know so much more than me, and now I'm behind, and like and feeling like it's overwhelming. And I think that's very important for employers to think about when it comes to upskilling in AI and other technological advancements as well, is how can you make it not feel overwhelming for employees? How can you make them feel they're part of it? How can you get them to start experiment, bring it into ideation sessions, brainstorming, speak about the why? Because it's also not about just implementing AI everywhere without any reason, right? It's about, okay, what do we want to do? The company wants to do ABC, then how can you better do ABC with the help of AI? So I think we need to not also be caught up in the hype and just watching all of these people on LinkedIn sharing stuff around AI and so on. We're still very, very much early in that journey. We're all very early in the journey. So making people feel like it's not overwhelming, I think, is the absolute key to it. Piquing that curiosity and then starting small with things like implementing GPT in workflows, I think, is a great start, for example. So I think that's the most important when it comes to upskilling employees in those areas.
This is why I do this, listeners. I listen and I learn. Okay, we are almost at the end of this particular conversation already, Nellie. Before we wrap up, how can our listeners connect with you? And it sounds like you're going to be all over the socials. So you're on all the cool new socials and probably a bunch of the traditional ones as well. And of course, Nellie, how can they learn more about Tigerhall?
So Tigerhall, we're on tigerhall.com. I also very much welcome direct emails to me. So my email address is Nellie, Nellie, @tigerhall.com. So that's how you reach me directly. And then I'm also very active on LinkedIn and now Threads as well. So follow me on LinkedIn and Threads, and you can reach out to me there as well.
Excellent. Well, that just leaves me to say for today, Nellie, thank you very much for being my guest.
Thank you for having me.
And listeners, as always, until next time, happy working.
Thanks for listening to the HR Chat Show. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe and listen to some of the hundreds of episodes published by HR Gazette? And remember, for what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit hrgazette.com.